Hello and welcome back. In today's video, we are diving into one of the most mysterious chapters in cartographic history, the 119-year period between 1624 and 1743, when maps across Europe consistently depicted North America buried beneath vast fields of ice, and within that period, 76 years during which California was a massive island. We will explore how this age of ice was not myth or artistic error, rather a record of real geological and climatic upheaval that reshaped the continent itself. In our last video, we established the foundation. From 1492 to 1568, the maps of the Americas were fragmented and unreliable. Speculation. But in 1569, with Mercator's revolutionary world map, everything changed. Suddenly, the entire coastline of North America appeared in stunning clarity. The divide between Russia and Alaska was recognized. Old World cities, Norumbega, Chalaga, Axa, Tontontec, were consistently recorded across maps from rival empires and for nearly 4 decades. And this was not limited to the coasts. Progressive cartographers like Jan Huygen van Linschoten in 1594 began filling in the interior with remarkable precision. Rivers, mountain ranges, and settlements, showing that the mapping of the continent was no longer speculative. It was active, expanding, and increasingly detailed with each generation of maps, reflecting genuine exploration and observation across North America. We confirmed that these geographers were not simple dreamers. They were scientists, craftsmen, navigators, professionals, working under immense economic and political pressure where accuracy was a matter of survival. We also confirmed that the cartographic record from 1569 through roughly 1624 reflects a consistent, empirically grounded understanding of North America, one so coherent that multiple maps across rival nations and decades align in remarkable detail. But then something changes. Between 1624 and 1700, the coastline that had once been stable and familiar transforms into something unrecognizable. The California Baja Peninsula is separate from the mainland, depicted as a massive island for the next 76 years. And from 1624 to 1743, 119 years, the unknown world is redefined by tens of thousands of cubic miles of ice. The northwest quadrant of North America, stretching from Alaska through western Canada, becomes buried beneath an immense ice sheet. And this new icy configuration does not vanish overnight. It persists, undisputed, across more than 119 years' worth of maps, 1624 to 1743, corroborated independently by various imperial powers. This is not a fleeting artistic error. It is a paradigm shift. Something happened geologically, climatically, and tectonically that reshaped the entire continent itself. Welcome to the Age of Ice. In this video, we will explore numerous tectonic events along the Pacific Ring of Fire, the implications of tens of thousands of cubic miles of ice resting atop the northwest continent, and how the gradual rebound of the Earth's crust slowly restored the land we recognize today. We will also consider the broader climatic context, including the historically documented Little Ice Age, which brought cooler temperatures and expanded glaciers, influencing both sea levels and environmental conditions during this period. As we trace the emergence and disappearance of California as an island on historical maps, we will examine the cartographic voids, periods of 15 to 20 years where the record falls silent, and explore their possible connections to major volcanic eruptions in Mexico, Chile, and Russia, as well as to the confirmed colossal tsunami that struck Japan in 1700. That tsunami was generated by the Cascadia earthquake along the subduction zone, where California lies, on January 26, 1700. Interestingly, this cluster of seismic and volcanic activity exactly coincides with the re-emergence of the Baja California Peninsula and the isostatic rebound of the Pacific Northwest. Recent geophysical models reveal that these patterns have a physical basis. During the Little Ice Age, expanding polar ice increased ocean salinity and density, driving deep currents that cooled the seas, lowered global sea levels, and provided the perfect condition for sea ice to extend far south from the Bering Sea. At the same time, the immense weight of continental ice over the Pacific Northwest caused the crust to sink, temporarily submerging low-lying regions. When the 1700 Cascadia megathrust earthquake released that pressure, the crust rebounded and volcanic activity intensified. rapidly melting ice and reshaping the coastlines. What is written off as myth is, in fact, a direct record of the planet's own response to a colder, heavier world. These geological events offer a tangible framework for understanding why early cartographers recorded what they did. Yet despite this growing body of evidence suggesting physical and climatic causes behind the island of California, the academic establishment continues to treat it as a historical curiosity rather than a genuine record of environmental transformation. To move forward, we must directly confront the three most common arguments used to dismiss California Island's depiction. First, the first-hand overland surveys conducted by Jesuit missionaries and explorers. Second, the degradation of source material and the cartographic errors said to result from repeated copying. And third, the political and mercantile incentives that have shaped these representations. However, the deeper issue lies not in these surface explanations, but in the broader tendency of academia to readily reject that early cartographers were documenting real, observable phenomena without exploring the broader context and provable geophysical facts. The island of California, we are told, was merely a myth, a cartographic misunderstanding rooted in literary fantasy, wishful thinking, and the propagation of early errors such as fictional islands described in a 1510 Spanish novel. This conventional perspective overlooks crucial context: the detailed North American maps produced between 1569 and 1607, the climactic effects of the Little Ice Age, which obscured coastlines and reshaped sea levels, and the extraordinary precision of the cartographers themselves. Ironically, these same experts, whose innovations form the foundation of modern cartography, are dismissed when it comes to the accuracy of their depiction of California. Moreover, the persistence of California as an island for 76 years, more than an entire generation, cannot be brushed aside as mere error. During this time, multiple empires were exploring, trading, and charting the region, yet the island depiction endured even as new data emerged. The endurance of this so-called mistake suggests that something far more complex and perhaps more significant was at play than a simple misinterpretation. By the end of this video, we will see how over 119 years of consistent ice-dominated maps reveal far more than a cartographic curiosity. They point to a real, physical event recorded in ink and parchment long before modern science gave it a name. And as we will uncover, this chapter ends in fire. A volcanic eruption in British Columbia beneath miles of ice triggered a cataclysmic melt. The result was a century of flooding, mudflow, and erosion that carved new shorelines across the continent and gave rise to what later maps would call the Bay of the West. This is Jan Huygen van Linschotten's 1595 map of the Indian Ocean. Three things should instantly jump out at you: Baixos de Chagos, Baixos de San Miguel, and Saya de Mala. These are three distinctly unique geometric shapes with multiple smaller geometric forms nested within Chagos and San Miguel. These are obviously three non-natural formations located just below the surface of the Indian Ocean in 1595. Would you like to know more? I have a detailed video on Saya de Mala where I track these underwater features across more than 250 years and break down a 2002 expedition to Saya de Mala where we discovered that this entire structure is hollow and scientifically demonstrated that it is a non-natural formation roughly the size of Switzerland, submerged approximately 500 years ago. Before we can appreciate the brilliance of the cartographers of this era, we need to understand why their work has been so widely dismissed. Modern historians often portray early cartographers as artists or dreamers, men limited by crude instruments and mythic hearsay, whose maps reflected imagination more than observation. But this view overlooks the technical mastery, mathematical precision, and the global collaboration that defined their craft. Establishing their credibility is essential because only by recognizing these cartographers as the skilled scientists and engineers that they were, can we begin to reassess the maps themselves, not as curiosities or mistakes, but as deliberate records of a world far more complex than we have ever been taught. The mainstream academic position holds that early modern maps, particularly those showing anomalies like California as an island or the vast Bay of the West, were the result of error, artistic license, or myth. According to this view, cartographers of the 16th and 17th centuries lacked the instruments, data, and geographic knowledge to represent the world with accuracy. Their charts, it is claimed, were largely speculative, copied and recopied across generations, each inheriting mistakes from the one before. In this telling, the ornate maps of the early modern period were more expressions of empire and imagination than of science. They were seen as political documents designed to impress patrons and monarchs, not as empirical records. This interpretation, parroted in classrooms and textbooks, has shaped the way we understand pre-Enlightenment geography, as a story of guesswork and artistic excess, corrected only later by the rise of modern science. But that narrative intentionally leaves something out. It ignores the technical sophistication of the instruments available at the time: astrolabes, quadrants, magnetic compasses, and later, precise astronomical tables. It discounts the painstaking measurements of longitude and latitude, the correspondence between map makers across nations, and the deliberate consistency of their results. It also intentionally frames the period when California appeared as an island on maps as a brief, isolated curiosity, just a few maps over a few years, while overlooking the much larger and more striking patterns over 70 years of cartographic records. Mainstream education does not acknowledge that Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia appear underwater, or that the vast majority of Canada is clearly depicted as submerged beneath ice for more than a century, recorded consistently across 117 years of maps. To put that into perspective, that is the entire lifetime of your grandparents, parents, you, and your children. In short, it underestimates the cartographers themselves, the technical precision they achieved, and the astonishing consistency of their observations, even when those observations reveal vast regions submerged under ice or water for over a century. Furthermore, the Tropic of Cancer is clearly marked on nearly all of these maps I'm presenting, providing a reliable reference point that underscores the cartographer's precision. Its consistent placement across decades serves as a landmark, reinforcing the accuracy of their broader observations even when depicting submerged lands or ice-covered regions. In short, when we look closely at the people behind these maps, we find not dreamers or decorators, but mathematicians, astronomers, engineers, and navigators operating at the front lines of their world. Individuals whose work defined the scientific standards that would later shape the Enlightenment. Thereby, before we move forward, we need to address the mainstream perspective head-on. If the modern claim is that early maps were careless, imaginative, or unscientific, the best way to test that claim is to look directly at the people who made them, because these were not amateurs sketching rumor or hearsay. They were among the most educated, mathematically trained, and globally connected minds of their time. So, before we continue deeper into the Age of Ice, let's take 10 minutes for a brief look at the men who defined this era of cartography and whose precision and ambition preserved the record we are now rediscovering. John Speed was among the most famous English cartographers. He trained as a tailor's apprentice, but, under patron Sir Fulk Greville, devoted himself to scholarly research. In 1598, Speed presented maps to Queen Elizabeth, who then rewarded him with a customs office. With support from antiquarian scholars like William Camden, Speed traveled Britain, drawing country maps and historical charts. His Theatre of the British Empire, 1612, pioneered national atlas making. His work helped to define early modern concepts of British national identity, and he is among the most famous English cartographers. Abel Tasman was a Dutch navigator and explorer whose voyages under the Dutch East India Company expanded Europe's geographic horizon. Commissioned by Governor-General Anthony van Diemen, Tasman charted the coastlines of Tasmania and parts of northern Australia. His meticulous journals and charts redefined the European conception of the Southern Hemisphere and established Dutch maritime supremacy across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Though primarily a navigator, Tasman's records became cornerstones for subsequent world maps and fueled the myth and later mapping of Terra Australis Incognita, which we are now forced to explore in a later video. Karel Allard was a prominent Amsterdam engraver and publisher whose family firm, Allard & Son, produced some of the most refined decorative maps of the late 17th century. Building on the legacy of his father, Hugo Allard, Karel combined artistic flourish with commercial acumen, issuing richly detailed wall maps and atlases admired across Europe. His work synthesized data from Blaeu, Sanson, and de Witt, making his editions both accurate and visually striking. Guillaume Sanson, the son of famous cartographer Nicolas Sanson, inherited and refined his father's cartographic enterprise, ensuring the continuation of the French cartographic ascendancy. Working closely with major Parisian publishers such as Pierre Mariette, He updated and expanded the Sanson atlases with new global discoveries and political divisions. His maps integrated contemporary reports from explorers and diplomats, preserving the Sanson reputation for precision and scholarly authority. Guillaume's continuity of style and scientific rigor maintained France's intellectual leadership in geography into the early Enlightenment. Adam Zerner was a German geographer and engineer celebrated for his pioneering precision in land surveying. Serving under Augustus the Strong of Saxony, he produced extraordinarily detailed regional maps that blended cartographic science with topographic measurement. His Atlas Augustus exemplified state-sponsored mapping for administrative and military use, and his work helped institutionalize the discipline of cadastral surveying in Central Europe. Zerner's technical accuracy and geographic realism bridged Renaissance cartography and the Enlightenment's empiricism, earning him recognition among Europe's leading scientific cartographers. Guillaume was a highly notable French cartographer whose scientific rigor and use of astronomical data revolutionized European mapmaking. A child prodigy trained by the mathematician Jean-Dominique Cassini, he applied celestial measurements to determine accurate longitudes and latitudes, producing the most reliable maps of his time. Deal was appointed the first geographer to the king by Louis XIV, and his insistence on data accuracy over ornamentation made him a foundational figure in scientific cartography and set the standard for Enlightenment geography. Henry Briggs was an English mathematician and astronomer best known as the pioneer of logarithms and a founding figure of modern numerical computation. As the first professor of geometry at Gresham College and later at Oxford, Briggs was deeply engaged with navigation and cartography, applying mathematics to solve the problem of longitude and improve maritime charts. Though his cartographic work was limited, his influence was vast. His 1625 map of North America alone was one of the earliest to fully depict California as an island. Briggs's approach to mapping was analytical. He sought mathematical harmony in geography, treating coastlines and distances as calculable phenomena rather than artistic interpretations. What I am getting at here is, contrary to what modern history wants you to believe, these were not minor figures in history who just squiggled shit on a map and called it a day. They were meticulous, highly skilled individuals who bridged the gap between exploration, scientific discovery, and art. They did not simply guess or make whimsical creations, each one contributed to a deeper understanding of the world. Their maps were informed by years of careful observation, astronomical calculations, first-hand expeditions, and emerging theories about the Earth's shape and geography. The maps they created were not just representations, they were tools, guides to navigating unknown realms, and records of humanity's intellectual and cultural advancements. In fact, these cartographers were foundational to the very way we understand the world today, laying the groundwork for everything from modern geography to global exploration. When we look at their work, we are not just looking at lines and borders, we are witnessing the birth of a new era of scientific inquiry and spatial understanding. To dismiss their work as fantasy is a disservice to their contributions to history and, unfortunately, emblematic of modern academia. Their maps were not the product of wild imagination, they were the result of calculated empirical knowledge that shaped the way we see the world today, and it is downright deceptive to reduce their legacy to mere artistic mistake. Jan Huygen van Linschoten is one of the most pivotal figures in the age of exploration. Born in 1563 in Haarlem, Netherlands, his book Itinerario, 1596, broke the Portuguese and Spanish monopoly on the Asian trade by revealing key maritime routes and navigational secrets. His first-hand experience in Portuguese colonies gave him access to closely guarded data on winds, currents, and coastal landmarks. This knowledge laid the foundation for the Dutch and English East India Companies, transforming global trade and geopolitics. Linschoten's maps and writings became crucial tools for further exploration. His maps were seen as reliable due to his first-hand experiences in Asia and access to closely guarded Portuguese navigational data. We need to take a 2-minute stop off here and take note of the world the cartographers were recording. But before we move on, just a quick note, you may notice the timeline shifting slightly as we go. I am not trying to slip one past you. Earlier I referenced 1624 as the beginning of the Age of Ice and the first appearance of California as an island on European maps. Since then, I have come across a 1610 map from China and a 1704 map from the Dutch, both of which we will examine later, and they actually strengthen the argument even further. These earlier and later sources do not contradict the pattern, they expand it, revealing that the phenomenon was recognized across cultures and persisted longer than commonly acknowledged. But again, that said, I'm not trying to slip one past you, it's just shifting data. On to the mini ice age. This period, roughly 1610 to 1740, falls squarely within what climatologists refer to as the Little Ice Age, 1350 to 1850. Across the northern hemisphere, average temperatures drop dramatically. Rivers like the Thames in London and the Seine in Paris froze solid for months at a time. Glaciers advanced through the Alps. Sea ice crept south, choking harbors in Scandinavia and even New England. And yet, in typical fashion, modern historians and climatologists tend to frame this little ice age as a quaint European anomaly, picturesque frost fairs on the Thames, while largely ignoring its global reach. Few seem willing to ask what those same climatic shifts meant for North America, even though the cartographic record clearly shows an entire continent reshaped by ice, water, and time. But at the same time, solar output declined, and, as the planet does, it adapted. Volcanic activity increased and global weather patterns shifted in a way that no one at the time could explain. But these changes were not just environmental, they were geographical. Coastlines altered, lakes expanded, and river systems migrated under the pressure of prolonged cold and glacial mass. And in the next part of this video, we will go deeper into the actual physics behind this frozen world. We will look at how expanding sea ice drives ocean circulation, how glacial weight bends the crust, and how those same forces would have physically reshaped the coast that these map makers were recording. So when we look at the maps from this era, maps showing expanded ice, altered shorelines, and massive inland seas, we are not looking at errors, embellishments, or artistic flourishes. We are looking at the cartographic fingerprint of the Little Ice Age itself. These map makers were not confused. They were documenting a world in flux, a world reshaped by cold, pressure, and shifting earth beneath their feet. Okay. We have worked through 50 minutes worth of background context, and this is unfortunately the perfect place to pause. In closing, let us pull back and see the full arc we have uncovered, the paradigm shifts that no mainstream or even alternative historical narrative have ever explained. From here on out, I'm going to be throwing around the word paradigm a lot, and if we're not on the same page about what that word actually means, everything you are about to see can be misunderstood, so let's clearly define it. When I say paradigm, I do not mean a guess, I do not mean a myth, and I do not mean one person's opinion. A paradigm is the shared model of reality that experts operate within at a given time. It is the framework that tells them what the world is, based on the best data, tools, instrument, and assumptions available to them. A paradigm determines what gets drawn on a map, what gets left blank, what is considered possible, and what is dismissed as error. It defines the limitations of expectations. Explorers sail within it, cartographers draw within it, and empires plan within it. And that is important because paradigms do not change easily. We began with the Old World paradigm. From 1567 to 1607, a stable, richly detailed North America, consistent coastlines, inland rivers, old world cities like Norumbega anchoring a vibrant, fully known continent whispered on the fringes as Tartarian. It did not vanish overnight. 5 transitional maps from 1610 to 1643 clung to that view, and then a 169-year gap before North America is fully mapped again. Paradigm shift. Then came the Age of Ice paradigm, starting around 1610 and dominating until 1743. Ice sheets blanket the Northwest. The west coast from California northward submerges, and California itself is drawn as a massive island for 90 years. This was not random. It is perfectly timed with the 1700 Cascadia megathrust quake, the 1700 Japanese mega tsunami, and 7 First Nation accounts from the North American First Nations describing the Great Shake and reshaping floods. 10 maps from 1745 to 1761 continue to show the West Coast as unknown, and then never again. Paradigm shift. Transition and overlap hit hard around 1700 to 1745, right after the quake. California reappears as a peninsula, just like pre-1607, but the old island view fights on, with 10 maps stubbornly holding the line until 1745, and 2 duplicates lingering into 1790. Paradigms colliding as the ice retreats. Paradigm shift. Next, the Bay of the West paradigm from 1744 to 1776. A vast inland embayment appears on the northwest coast. 12 separate maps embrace it. The old guard resists. 5 lingering maps from 1781 to 1787 still show traces, and then never again. Paradigm shift. Finally, post-1776, the modern coast locks in. California's peninsula is solidified, the bay vanishes, the Northwest stabilizes into the shape we know today, coinciding with the end of the Marauder Minimum and the fading Little Ice Age. Again and again we see the classic pattern. A new reality emerges, cartographers and explorers confirm it, but the old guard clings on for 20 to 30 years, a full generation, before a new paradigm is confirmed and the outdated view dies off. This is not random error or myth. It is the land itself changing and the maps faithfully recording it. And here's the thread that pulls it all together. Modern history, as we are taught it, does not truly begin until after a strategic wipe, a deliberate erasure of the records that would expose this frozen chapter. Disagree? Then please, fill me in on the 169-year gap in the cartographic record. Post-1776, as the ice paradigms fade and the coast stabilizes, we see a surge in enlightened narratives that dismiss these maps as folly. While archives are curated, libraries are lost in fires, like the 1812 burning of Washington or the repeated accidents in European repositories, and indigenous oral histories are marginalized as myth. This was not accidental, it was a reset, paving over the cataclysmic truths of submersion, die-offs, and rebound to craft a sanitized story of steady progress. The maps survived as curiosities because they were too widespread to destroy entirely. Thousands of copies scattered across Europe, Russia, and Asia, but their meaning was scrubbed clean, reclassified as errors, myth, or decorative fantasies. Archives were selectively curated, inconvenient journals vanished in fires, and indigenous testimonies dismissed as folklore. The result? A history that starts conveniently fresh after 1776, unburdened by the frozen apocalypse that reshaped everything before. And yes, you would have to be more than a little crazy to sit here for 3 years staring at hundreds of these old maps, cross-referencing dates, ice lines, and rebound physics, trying to piece it all together from the cartographic record alone. I know, because I am. Crazy or not, once the pattern snaps into focus, it is impossible to unsee. The land changed, the maps recorded it, and everything we have been told about steady progress and cartographic mistakes begins to look a lot like a lie. And here is what ties it all together for anyone chasing Tartaria, mud floods, orphan trains, or the Cabbage Patch mysteries. We have had the stunning architecture, empty cities, and sudden resets, but no grounded mechanism explaining where those people went, why grand cities were abandoned, or why we needed massive repopulation in the 19th century. This is that missing link. Little Ice Age submersion, crustal sinking, die-off from cold and liquefaction, mud flows burying lower levels, followed by the great melts erasing the rest. Survivors dwindled, cities vanished under ice and silt. Then, as the land rebounded, new waves arrived to repopulate a mysteriously empty continent. If you are in these communities, please share this video far and wide. Post it, discuss it, try to tear it apart if you can. Challenge every claim. The truth deserves daylight, and it can only survive real scrutiny. That is why I'm putting this out there raw. I need peer review in the truest sense of the word, not from gate-kept journals or credentialed echo chambers, but from you, sharp minds who have been digging into the same shadows I have. Please leave your toughest questions in the comments below. Poke holes in the timelines, the physics, the map interpretations. Come at me hard. I am ready to defend this thesis point by point, update it where the evidence demands, and even abandon parts if they do not hold up. Because if this is right, it changes everything. And if it is wrong, we all deserve to know why. Either way, let's do this together. Drop your challenges below. I swear I will be there. From paradigm definitions to the physics of polar downwelling, indigenous testimonies, cartographic timelines, and the geophysical chain that ties it all to real-world cataclysm. All of the pieces are now on the table: the ice advance, the submersion, the 1700 quake, the rebound, the fleeting Bay of the West, but this was all just the setup. In the next video, we are hitting this hard and fast. A complete summary of the 200-year narrative, tying every loose end together into an unbreakable chain of evidence, and a complete point-by-point defense of this thesis against every skeptic's angle. We will dissect the counter-arguments, drill into the sediments for proof, and show why this is not just a theory. It is the reset that explains everything we have been missing as a species with collective amnesia. See you there, and as always, thank you for sticking around until the end. I appreciate it. Here's a short video of my little fur baby in the bath. Good girl.